Hello, Salado youth, Salado youth families. Hope that you're doing well wherever you are, whenever you watch this video. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, where you're going through a rough patch in life, and suddenly, out of nowhere, one of your friends that maybe isn't super close to you suddenly becomes much more close to you. They step up as a friend and really help you out. I had this happen to me once in my life. I was going through a really, really rough patch. And one of my friends who I really thought of as kind of more of a acquaintance type friend turned out to be a really true friend and really stepped up and helped take care of me and made sure that I was being healthy and that I was in a good place mentally and physically and took care of everything from feeding me meals to just keeping my spirits up. In our story today, in Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 18, we see this happen in the lives of the characters from this story. So the story begins in the land of Israel. And in Israel at this time, there is a famine, so food is scarce. And this Israelite family, which consists of a man and his wife Naomi and his two sons, decide that they're going to move to a foreign country, to the country of Moab, which is a different country than Israel, different customs, different religions, just a different place. And a lot of times, Moab and Israel were not always on good terms. They seem to be on okay terms at this point, but this is a country that relationships have not always been good, maybe a little like us in England, maybe at this point. So they decide to move to Moab. They stay there about 10 years, which is a long time if you think about it, to live in a foreign land. But during those 10 years, the man dies, and his two sons take Moabite wives, Orpah and Ruth, and eventually the sons die as well. So we're left with Naomi, the mother-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, the two daughters-in-law. And Naomi decides that she's going to go back to Israel because she's heard that now there is food there, that there's more food in Israel than there is in Moab, and she probably misses home. So she decides that she's going to move back. So on the journey back, she tells Orpah and Ruth that they need to stay behind, that there's nothing for them in Israel. There's not going to be any men to marry, and they're going to be in a terrible state. You see, for women back then, to not have a husband was a big deal because that's how you were provided for. Women usually didn't work outside of the home. The men were the ones who went out and made the money, and so women needed to be provided for in this patriarchal society that they lived in. And especially so in times of famine. There's a shortage of food, resources are tight, and Naomi knows that it's just going to be difficult for the three of them to make a living and sustain themselves. And she feels it would just be better if they went back and lived with their families. But Ruth refuses to do so. Orpah decides to go back, and Ruth decides to stay. And Ruth makes this pledge of devotion in verses 16 through 18 that we hear read at weddings. It's a beautiful passage about wanting to stay with someone. Now, we don't know why Ruth is so devoted, what it is that she sees in Naomi, but it points out a few things. And first is when people are going through tough times, they're going through tough times, just the way it is. And there's no judgment here. In fact, Ruth ends up becoming the great, I don't know how many generations, grandmother of King David. She's in the lineage of King David, but she was a foreigner. And sometimes we look down on people who are going through tough times, who are struggling to make ends meet, who are having to move around because of economic insecurity. And that we really shouldn't do that. We're called to love everyone. And in this case, we see the good that God works out of this situation that Ruth finds herself in. Now, that's not to throw a blanket of goodness over everything that happens here. There's some stuff in the story later that is a little bit of a struggle, but the point is that Ruth is a good person. Ruth loves Naomi, and Ruth has really seen Naomi as family. And that's the second point, is that while our family is super important to us, we all have met people that we feel so close to that they're like family. And those relationships are such a blessing from God. And we should be thankful that we have them and devoted to them. And accept the blessings that we've been given through those times of devotion. And we should also learn to be those people for those who rely on us. When we have a friend who's struggling and going through hard times, are we willing to be there for them, to make those commitments to them, to step up to the plate and stick with them and follow through? Friendships are really important, especially at your stage of life as teenagers. But sometimes friendships get really fractured and they become problematic. And so we should really be thankful for those friendships we have that are solid. And we should seek ways that we can show God's love through those friendships that we have. Hope this word finds you blessed. Know that you're loved. We will see you all soon.